And welcome to another presentation of the online ColdFusion Meetup. I'm Charlie Arehart, and I'll be your host for the next hour or so. And in this edition of the Meetup, our 306th, being recorded on Thursday, January 25th at noon U.S. Eastern Time, I'll be presenting on the many capabilities of CF Package Management and cfpm. And I'll talk more about that in a moment. But before we do, I just want to say, as I always do, that if you want to spread the word to folks about finding the Meetup, you can just direct them to the domain name coldfusionmeetup.com. That takes them to the meetup.com site, subsite for the online CF Meetup. And then you can always find recordings of previous meetings at this URL, recordings.coldfusionmeetup.com. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So I'm sure some people, when they heard this talk or heard of it, they probably yawned and thought, well, there's nothing much to talk about. In fact, if you look around on the web, you don't find very many discussions of it. You don't find any other presentations about it. You don't find too much from anybody other than one blog post from Adobe way back 4 years ago when the feature came out. And I don't think it's that there's not much to say. I think it's that it's kind of the tail wagging the dog. Nobody talks about it. So a lot of people don't even know it exists. Some of you maybe even didn't know it existed until you heard word of this presentation. So anyway, I'm here to talk to all those audiences. I want to impress upon those who know about it but think there's nothing to it, that there are indeed many capabilities and maybe more than they thought. And then for those who had no idea what it was, you might learn a whole new dimension of possibilities and an aspect of how things have changed, especially in CF 2021 and above. So anyway, we'll get into all that in just a moment. There's my contact information. If you ever have any need to follow up, I welcome your feedback, sharing news of the presentation, what you think, good or bad. I mean, any news is good news. So any PR is good PR. So feel free to share your thoughts there in the various social media. I'm on all of them at that same Arehart handle. All right. So I kind of already presage this. The package management feature and the CFPM tool that supports it offer a lot more than most people realize. And it helps manage packages. And you might have seen that and said, okay, what does that mean? Well, we're going to talk about what that means. And we'll talk about those features, those two features together, their history and evolution. Some things have changed since CF 2021. We'll also talk about using it in ways that you maybe didn't envision. Of course, you can use it to manage what they call packages, but there's another facet of this that has to do with an option for using it to manage CF updates themselves. So we'll come back to that later. And then you can also use it to set up CF instances in an automated fashion. And that might make some ears prick up because maybe you thought it's something I'll never use. But if you like to deploy CF containers with Adobe CF images, and I believe, even the command box Adobe CF images support the feature that I'll tell you about later. So there's a way to use this capability to facilitate setting up a new container and, of course, a whole new instance of CF deployed on a server or in the cloud or whatever. Well, anyway, let's move on. And that's what I was saying. You can use it for automation. And there you go. So I'm sorry. Got a little ahead of myself in some of these bullet points. Anyway, now this may be for some of you the coolest thing you learn in this talk. It's got a capability to scan your CF code base to identify what packages you need. Now, again, I know we haven't yet talked really too much about what packages are, and it'll make more sense once I get there. We'll do that next. But I'm just saying, as an intro, I'm letting you know that another reason you want to stick around is to learn this capability of scanning your code base. And before any of you chime in and say, it doesn't work, we'll talk about that too. So hold your horses. Thank you for your desire to help everybody out. Anyway, we will discuss this CLI tool called CFPM. We'll also talk about how there's aspects of it that are in the CF Administrator. Some of you already seen that. Some of you maybe never have, didn't know about it. All right, and we'll talk about some more things. So with that, let's go ahead and move on. First, quick introduction for myself. For those who don't know me, I just focus on CF server troubleshooting. I'm an independent consultant, don't work for anybody. And I help people all the time, every day. It's all I do, assisting organizations of all sizes and experience levels. And I work remotely. It's safe and secure and easy via shared desktop, Zoom, Meet, Teams, whatever you want to use. And I try to solve most problems in less than an hour. And I teach you as we go. Now, some problems can take a little longer, and some can even be a couple hours, few hours. Some problems have been quite naughty, but in all my, now 15, 17 years of doing it, that's pretty few and far between. So it's usually I'm able to solve most problems in less than an hour because I see these things every day, and I sometimes connect the dots very quickly. Most important is that your satisfaction is guaranteed. If we spend time together and you don't find it valuable, then you won't pay for that time. So there's no reason not to at least reach out, and I'll let you know if I can help. And if we meet, we'll give it a try, and hopefully we will. And you can learn more about my rates, my approach, my online calendar, everything at carehart.org/consulting. But to be clear, as often with these talks, and pretty much as always, I should say as always with these talks, I'm not selling anything. I'm just sharing information, things that I've learned or that I've learned in the community. And as always, my presentations are available online at carehart.org/presentations. And you can find this one there, and it's already posted. And if you want to go ahead and get it, feel free. The point is, don't worry that if you see something and it's a URL, you can just go get the PDF later and the URLs are there. All right. And then otherwise, don't forget the session is being recorded. This session is being recorded, and the recording will be available again online afterwards at that site. And it's this same URL that you're looking at right now. This YouTube meeting that you're looking at is the URL for watching the recording when we're done. And I'll post that after the meeting. All right. So moving on. What is this package management you speak of? All right. So it was introduced in CF 2021. So if you're on CF 2018 or earlier, if you've never paid attention to 2021 or above, you may never even notice this was here. But it was a feature and basically a modification to the architectural underpinnings of CF in CF 2021. And what it is that they took all the things that CF does in terms of the underlying, and we all know, by and large, most of us know that ColdFusion runs on Java. So they took all these Java-based, modules and classes and things like that and put them into packages, and then associated, various tags and functions with a given package. And there's about 50 of these packages. And if you were to look at the CF administrator, you would see a listing of these 50 or so packages. And in fact, let me just get this started. I realized I had stopped this. I was trying to deal with some performance issues, but I realized I do want to show you guys some stuff. So in a moment, I'll hop over and look at the CF admin, and we'll take a look at what that looks like. But the point is, if any of you have been to that page, you've seen there's like 50 packages. And, like there's a PDF package if you use the features in CF that deal with PDFs. And there's a mail package if you want to have it do CF mail. And there's a SQL Server package if you want to have it talk to SQL Server doing, stored procedure calls or CF query calls, and so on and so on. And so the good news is, conceptually, one could say, well, I don't need all those things. I'll just get the packages that I need. And that was one of the goals, for people to be able to create a much smaller implementation of the ColdFusion engine. And especially if you do use the ColdFusion Docker images and containers, create containers, there might be great value to you to keep them small. And by default, the CF Docker containers, when you deploy them, the images and the containers that get created from them are very small, 100 meg, 150 meg, something like that. So, and then if you want to be able to do various things, you have to add the packages. Well, let me just back up and clarify that a reason why a lot of people have no idea of this stuff is that if you're just installing the regular installer of ColdFusion, you get all the packages by default, and you don't think twice about this. It's just there. And the CF that we've always known was always a big monolithic thing that had support for everything. But those who want to break things down and pull things out, or create some bare bones CF engine and then just add the few things they need, yeah, that's the whole goal. That is the real intent of this. But I'll just say, don't feel bad if you missed that. If you don't care, really, even when I've told you this, you may still say, I don't care. Then you might want to just watch this for interest's sake. So when you hear discussions of it, or if you want to contribute to discussions of it, you can speak a little more accurately. So like I said, there's about 50 packages. Sometimes they refer to them as modules. It's the same thing, whether it's a package or a module. Don't worry about that. And I mentioned that this is zip. I mentioned the containers start out also small. I should back up and say you may have noticed, and I talked about this in a recent CF meetup. I did a talk on installing ColdFusion, and I mentioned how since CF 2021, you have an option also to deploy CF via a zip instead of as an installer. The installer installs all the packages. The zip, like the container, starts out with virtually none. It's not none. It's got the administrative one and one other. I can't remember, but it's got just a couple, two, I think, packages built in, and you can remove them and you can add to them. And the point is, if you do the zip install approach, well, for better or worse, you end up with a very bare bones implementation of CF. And that's caused some people heartburn because they think when they're going through the download process of ColdFusion, they say, hey, there's a zip. I'll get the zip, sure. And then they realize, hey, wait a second, there's no installer. I got to extract things. I got to run the CF install script. Wait, what? And then they get it going and they find their app doesn't work. It's like, because there's no packages installed. I got to go add packages. So it's led to some confusion for people who didn't understand that the thinking of a segment of the CF team was, hey, let's make it so people can have very small implementations, add just what they want. But most people who got experience with CF for years are like, look, I just want it running. Just do everything, please install it all. So anyway, we'll see how you can also install all the packages using this package management tool. And now I can turn to the CF administrator. So give me just a second to get that fired up for you. On monitor. And by the way, I hope last week that this didn't happen to too many people, that you couldn't see my browser I was looking at, because I had multiple windows and I'd moved one of my browser windows off to a monitor that wasn't being shared, and nobody chimed in and said, hey, we can't see what you're doing, but I fear that I might have done that. Anyway, you should be able to see this, and nobody said a word, so feel free to chime in. Maybe somebody confirmed, yes, we see that, and I'll even bump it up a notch just in case it helps people to read those. But here's the bigger point. So this happens to be the CF 2023 admin. CF 2021 admin looks the same. Some of you will go, it doesn't look the same to me because you're on CF 2016 or earlier, and the admin is quite different since CF 2018. It's just they moved the buttons, instead of the sections on the left, it became buttons. Anyway, the buttons at the bottom, one of them, the second one from the bottom, in the case of CF 2021, it's CF 2018, the bottom one is the update thing. Well, in 2021, the thing that was the update thing is now the package manager, and it's now second from the bottom. That can be a little confusing for some people. But anyway, you click on that package manager, and those who have installed, by the way, I haven't seen anybody comment. I'm not paying attention to how many people are in the room, but if anybody was being coy and didn't want to type in because they thought a whole bunch of other people would, I'll stop. I want to make sure. Can anybody confirm that you're hearing me? Because there could be some problem. And I'd always stopped for that before, and everybody said, yeah, we hear you fine. But now I'm not hearing anybody. There you go. Fingers crossed, dark mode in the next admin. Thank you, Roman. I guess nobody heard me ask you to comment otherwise, but thank you for that. At least know somebody's listening. I assume you're hearing me. Anyway, Roman, so you're right. Fingers crossed that they will add a dark mode. Let me just share with you that if you use Chrome or Edge, and I'm pretty sure they have this for Firefox as well, you can get a plugin or an extension or whatever the different things call them that can do dark mode for anything. And in fact, I've got that. That's this right here, and it's called Amazing Dark Mode. And if you enable it, then the page becomes dark. There you go. So, and any page you visit becomes dark, and you can turn off on a particular page to not see that. So normally that is on. I don't know why that didn't come on. But that's one of the things about it being an extension, is that, the extension might have a quirk where it doesn't come on sometimes. But anyway, usually if you just refresh the page, it comes on. But you can control which pages show the dark mode, which ones don't. There's a whitelist feature. So anyway, there you go. You got dark mode. Can hear and see. Good. Thank you for that. All right, so now let's move back to what we're talking about. So here's the package manager page of the CF Administrator in 2021 and 2023. It's called the package manager page. It was the updates page, and it's the updates page. It's just, we're not going to talk about updates today, but the core server is what we think of as the thing that's, quote, updating ColdFusion. And then if you notice, if you collapse it, or if you just scroll down the page, below the discussion of the core server is this discussion of packages, installed packages and available packages. And the available ones are ones that for whatever reason haven't been installed yet. And it's funny, I hadn't noticed this, but I've seen some people complain that they found that they couldn't do report features with ColdFusion as of some update. Well, maybe something about the update mechanism failed to import the package or install it. So this is actually an interesting opportunity. We'll take advantage of this later. How do we go about installing one or all packages? That's not my goal right now. We'll get back to managing packages later. But now let me just show you the installed packages. And again, look how many there are. And it goes on and on and on. There's about 50 of them. And you can see there's ones that are admin related. And then there's ones that are, things that maybe you'll never touch, like AWS DynamoDB and AWS Lambda. Well, that's the benefit. If you really wanted them out, you could take them out. Although having them there doesn't really cost that much, doesn't add that much burden. So I'm not a big fan of tweaking this needlessly. If you're going to deploy on a small environment and it's important, go for it. But if you're deploying on a server that you've always run ColdFusion on, don't worry about taking packages out just to try to optimize things. You can play with it, go ahead, knock yourself out. But to me, it's just not worth the effort. So you might even wonder, well, then why are we talking about it? Well, I'm just saying I'm not bringing it up to tweak and tune things. I'm bringing it up to explain what the feature's about, to explain how the CFPM tool works, how the admin UI can also be used to manage things. That's my goal in this talk. And that's all I wanted to do, was introduce that there's at least that. There's more I'll talk about. We'll come back to that later. But yeah, there's a CFPM tool. So if you go to the command line and go to the right place in the command line to the file system, let me just show you, and let me bump this up just a little bit. Might help some readers. Just realized, I think on modern versions of Windows, I can just hit the plus. So Control plus, and let that be a lesson for any of you guys who care to know this stuff. In modern versions of Windows, if you're using the terminal, which I'm using, don't worry about it if you don't know what it is, but if you're using the terminal, Control plus, bumped up the fonts. In our environment, we exclude 16 packages, most of them related to AWS, Azure, databases we don't use. There you go. So P, I'll just say P, I don't know your full name. P is saying they do what I just said. You could absolutely use this to remove what you think you don't need. And somebody could make the argument, well, we're removing it because it reduces, our risk exposure and our surface area. Okay. Again, I'm not saying don't do that. I'm not here to really debate those things. And I don't think you brought it up to debate it. I'm just saying there will be people who say, oh, you should absolutely remove what you don't need. Okay. Go for it. That's not what I'm here to talk about. Now, when I come back to this later, somebody's going to say, well, how do I know what I don't need? How do I know what I do need? Well, we're going to show you that towards the end. There's a feature that lets you find out what packages you need. And you see I'm putting that towards the end because it's something to know, but it's not the first thing you should know. Although there was a little bit of a debate on one of the forum threads where somebody else argued, yes, absolutely, that's the first thing I need to know is what packages do I need? Okay. Again, I know some people think that's critical. For now, let's move on. I'm talking to the average person for whom that's not so critical. Back to the CFPM. So notice I'm in the ColdFusion and I'm in 2023. You could be in 2021. It's not in 2018 or earlier. So in 2023 or 2021, on Windows, on Linux, on Mac, on Solaris, doesn't matter. In the ColdFusion 2023, you have an instance folder, which the default is CFusion. If you have multiple instances, there'll be if you had a Bob instance, it'll be ColdFusion 2023 Bob. And then within that instance folder is a bin. And some of you know that. You know that in there's like the CF start command, and there's the password reset script, and there's lots of cool stuff in the bin folder. Well, now in the bin folder in CF 2021 and above is this thing called CFPM. And I'm on Windows, so I'll just do CFPM. Sorry, CFPM. And it's a batch file on Windows. It's an SH on Linux, OS X, and or Mac OS and Solaris. So anyway, it's just CFPM. And in your Unix environment, you'd say /CFPM.sh. In Windows, we can just say CFPM. Now, the CFPM tool, if I just type CFPM and say help, I get back a display of what the available commands are. And this CFPM tool can be used this way, where you say CFPM something, and these are the somethings you can do. And I'm going to go over what these are later. That's not important right now to go over what they are, but each of these is a command. And so I happen to just do cfpm help, and you can see that help is one of the commands. So you can do these sort of directives. I can also say list all. I'll just tell you there's a list all, and it lists all the packages currently installed. Again, that's not right now what I wanted to focus on, but what I want to show you is that, so that's using the CFPM command with these, what's the opposite of declarative? Assertive. Anyway, saying CFPM do this thing. That's one way to go. I said CFPM list all, but in a lot of tools that CF's got, and also those use command box, you can say box something and do that thing, or you can say box and you go into a CLI. Well, the same thing's true with the CFPM. I can just say CFPM, and now I'm in the CLI. Notice there's a prompt there at the bottom, and let me just clear the screen, and it's got a clear screen. CLS is the clear screen command, or if you don't remember it, you can type help, and there's the available commands, just like we saw at the command line when I said CFPM help. If I'm in the CFPM CLI shell, if you want to call it that, the point is that you can enter these same commands within the shell, and generally it's identical whether you do one way or the other. I found one quirk where it actually doesn't work the same in and out, and we'll talk about that later. But anyway, so that's the CFPM, is it's a command line tool, and you can to get out of it, you might try to type exit. Everybody wants to type exit, and for some reason they didn't choose to implement exit. But right in the middle of the screen, you can see quit, so you can type Q or quit. I hope someday they'll add an alias called exit, and it says goodbye. And now I'm back out to the command line of whatever I'm in, and I'm in Windows, so I'm back to the Windows command line. All right, let's move on. Again, trust me, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I just want to give you these heads up, front door things to understand before we talk about the details. All right, so I've already given you that imperative. That was the phrase I was looking for. So you can imperatively pass in commands, or you can go into the shell, and we just did that. All right, cool. So now let's talk about what can you do. Well, we've seen that in my case, there were 2 packages that I don't currently have installed. I could install those packages from the command line, and notice I can add or remove. So add packages or remove installed packages, and I can either do that to some or to all. And so there's an install and an uninstall command in the CFPM. So if I say, I'll say CFPM list, that listed again all of them. I could list some things, I can do more. We'll talk about that later. But we had seen that in the CF admin I had open, that I had available packages down here that had not yet been installed. So one was report. And so that's, for those who don't know, CF since like, I don't know, 4, had a CF report tag that leveraged a CFR file that got created by a report builder. Now that report builder has been deprecated and unsupported since CF 2018. And some people love the report builder and have been leveraging it for years, and they're complaining to Adobe, please don't take it away. And Adobe has said they're working to bring back some improved variant of it. So again, not the topic for today, but that report module is something that some people would need. If you use the CF report tag, you'll need this. Well, to add it, I just want to be clear, someone who has access to the admin who saw this could just literally click this button and install it. And in fact, I'm just going to go ahead and do that right now. I'll do the report one here in the admin, and then I'll do the scheduler one from the command line. So I'll just click it, and it pops up some information about it. It says, hey, this helps with creating reports, displaying it, blah, blah, blah. And again, be careful. That's not really about the other things related to producing PDFs or Excel files. It's just this report thing. Anyway, and that's where I'll say there might be some subtlety about that I'm not 100% sure on. This is all we get. There's not any further detail. There's nothing that lists what tags and functions rely on what packages. I wish there was, but there isn't. It does say what underlying Java jars are related to, depending on. So anyway, moving on, it's telling me that for that report package or module, whatever you want to call it, there's the versions that are available. And I'm running on update 6. I'll just tell you, I'm running on CF 2023 update 6. That's the current latest version from November. And it's telling me, well, there isn't an update 6 package because update 6 was just a update for security. There was no changes to modules. But there's an update 5, and I'm just letting you know, hey, there's the update 5 one, and there's also the 0 update one, which was the original one. And one could choose which one they wanted to install, both through this interface and from the command line. But for now, let's just say I'm going to install. It told me the latest available one. That's what I want. I'm just going to click install. Now, what I want you all to understand about this, why I'm showing you this, is you might think, wait a minute, I can't be doing that in the middle of the day. I got to bring down my server, and we can't bring down our server. No, it's done. Up at the top of the screen, it says package has been installed successfully. So this package management feature is leveraging capabilities under the covers. Some of you may hear the term Felix. It's a Java, package management, modularization, architecture capability. Adobe is leveraging it. Lucy is leveraging it, I believe, starting in Lucy 6. They may have done it in 5. I apologize. I don't mean to cast any aspersions. I'm just saying Lucy is also going the modular way, and ColdFusion has been doing it since 2021. And some people just never knew, and you wouldn't be the first to not know. Well, anyway, what I was stressing is, look, I didn't need to restart ColdFusion. I just installed the package, and now I could start using it. That's pretty cool. Well, anyway, now let's go back to the command line. We know that there was a scheduler package, and it was literally just called scheduler. And by the way, if I ran something like, I guess if I were to run an example of a CF page that did a CF schedule tag, the error would come back saying, hey, you need to enable the, what does it say, scheduler? You just want to know exactly what the name is. That's what I'm getting at. The name is called scheduler. And the error message would say, hey, you don't have the scheduler module. In fact, let me show you another thing. I would assume that would mean that if we go up here to the scheduled tasks page, sorry, the first button has scheduled tasks. Yep, and it says the scheduler package is not installed. So I'm just trying to clarify that either as an administrator who tries to do something where the underlying package isn't there, you'll be told what package you need, or as a developer or a user of an app, if somebody runs a CF request that relies on something where the package underlying it isn't installed, an error message will say, this is not installed, and it'll tell you the name of it. So that's literally called scheduler. So now I can go to the command line, and again, I can either say cfpm install scheduler. I can do that, or I could type cfpm and hit enter, and now I'm in the shell, and I could type install scheduler. It works the same way, whatever you want to do. I'm going to say install scheduler, and it says this package will be installed. And notice it says it's downloading. Now, this is a gotcha that wasn't obvious. It did that in the administrator as well. It just isn't as obvious. This is a potential gotcha. If you're not on the internet, if your server is behind a air gapped, doesn't have any outbound access, you've got an outbound firewall, whatever, something that prevents outbound calls, then you'll find these things don't work when they're doing like an install, because it says, hey, I got to pull it down. We'll talk about that later. There's a way to solve that problem. Those of you who are doing that already know that when it comes time to update CF, you face the prospect that these CF updates, you can't download them either. They're all related. The things that does the CF update is also pulling down the update jar file as this CFPM install pulls down the underlying jar files that are needed just to do that package. Well, there are solutions to those problems. We'll come back to that later. Again, let's not focus on that right now. The bigger point was, look, it says has been installed. And if I go back to the administrator and just refresh this page, the scheduled task page, now I got my scheduled task back. And I didn't plan for that. I could have, though. You see, it would have been that simple. If I had thought about this, I could have hopped in, removed it before the start of the session and say, hey, look, I don't have it. Here's how easy it is to install. And I could right now uninstall. I'm not going to bother, although it is that simple. I just want to say it's that simple. In fact, let me just show you that, because we didn't really point that out. I'm just backing up, and causing it to refresh. And it also says there are no more packages to install. But what I want you to see is that for every one of these, let's just say I wanted to play that game. I'm not going to, but it just proves the point. If I click on that scheduler, now it says, yep, there it is installed. And look, there's a button to uninstall it. So I could uninstall it. I can click that button and it will uninstall it just as easily as I installed it. And then conversely, I could come in here and say uninstall scheduler, and it would uninstall it just as readily. Okay, so that's nice and simple. Cool. Don't see any questions or comments coming up, so we're going to move on. And yeah, it's straightforward, right? Now, we saw that I could see the list of packages in the admin, and we saw that I could list them with the list all command. So I'll just back off of this. And you can see it at the top of the screen. That's what was flowing by at the top of the screen. And something you'll notice, the list that's going to come up in a moment, it also shows you for each package what version. And by the way, this is conveying which one's installed, the dark green one, and which ones are available, the light yellow. And not everybody can see colors, but the one on the right is a lighter color. The one on the left is a darker color. And that's the distinction between those. And you might go, what can I do with that? Well, you actually can get more information about these. You can choose to install a particular one. So let me just show you about listing packages. Sorry, that was list. And then getting information on packages, there's info. So we don't have to go into the admin to find out more. I can say cfpm info scheduler, and it shows me information about that scheduled task, just like we saw in the admin. And again, you can use this information to decide what you want to do. And I forgot to tell you, but let me just say this cfpm help. And I'll page up to the top, because the install, they're not listed in alphabetical order. They're kind of listed in the order in which you would run them. And I just want to show you, I hadn't demonstrated this, but look, I could have chosen, just like in the admin, I could have said which version did I want. At the command line, I could have said install scheduler : and then I would have used that numeric information to say what version I wanted. So if I page up, remember here with scheduler, if I had said I wanted this one, I could have said install scheduler : and that number. I could have done that. I'm not going to bother, but you can do it. I'm just saying it's really that simple. All right, still no questions or comments. I'm going to go ahead and move on. Now about updating. So I don't have this scenario to demonstrate, but let's say I had opted to install the 2023.00 version of that scheduler package. And then I later learned that there was an update to it, and I wanted to update that package. Well, there is an update command. There's literally an update command. It's just update. So I could have updated a particular package, or I can update all the packages if I wanted to. Now, let me just back up before I go into this and say, again, a lot of you have been using CF 2021 or for years. It came out in 2020. It's been 3 years and 4 months. 3 months. Anyway, 3 years, 3 months. And 2023 just came out in May. You could have been using this stuff for years and never knew anything about this. And you might go, well, why don't I need to worry about this? Because when you run the update feature of the CF admin, by default, it also updates all the packages. It does do that. It leads that to be done. So you haven't had to worry about it. But if one is going to be playing around with the command line and doing the CFPM and managing things, or some of the other stuff we'll talk about later about deploying particular modules to create a new instance or create a container, then you might want to pay attention to the specific version of the package. And you might then, if you implement only one, you might want to update that one. And so I'm just saying there's an update command, and I could have said update scheduler, and it would have updated. Now I want to go back up or down to the commands, and I want you to see there's update all, which says do literally the update that we all know about. This command line can do that as well. Come back to that in a second. But you can update packages, and notice it says it'll update all the installed packages to the latest version applicable to the current server update. Now I want to point that out because when this stuff first came out, this wasn't too smart, and sometimes it would update the packages to a higher version than the update level you were on. And that caused some people grief because they might have said, I don't want to go. Like right now, 2023's latest version is 6. And maybe they were on 3, just pick a number randomly. And they were on update 3, and they didn't want their packages to be updated beyond update 3, whatever would be appropriate, which there were no packages for 3 and 2 or 1's update. So it'd be the original ones. Well, they didn't want the later ones. Well, it does now intelligently, since I forget, I'll tell you the date. I've got it written in there somewhere. Sometime recently, Adobe fixed it, so it does correctly get what you want. But the point is, that's how you can do the update. You can just update the packages, or you can update all. It's funny, I didn't think about this, but I would think we could update a particular one. I don't want to stop and do that, but I would expect that we should be able to say update scheduler, and we'll just update that. And maybe it won't. Again, I'm not going to take the time to demonstrate or find that out. It's a good, interesting example. Somebody tries it and finds out, let me know. If anybody's done it, let me know. Now, I mentioned that some updates have package updates and some do not. I said, I know that of the CF 2023 updates, 1, 2, 3, 4, they were just security updates. And then 5 was a bug fix update, and it updated packages and lots of stuff. So that update had updated packages. That's why we saw 0 and 5. That's the way it is. And 6 was a security update, didn't have any package updates. So the update tech notes will tell you this. And I just want to hop out and show people that who care to see it. I'm just going to randomly say ColdFusion 2023 update 6. And I hope you know that you can just come out, to Google or Bing or DuckDuckGo, what you like to use, and search for that. And among the first results that comes up, now be careful, this is one that lists all of them, which is nice, all the updates for 2023. But if we look at the update tech note for update 6 specifically, that other one would have pointed at this. On the update tech note for update 6 of CF 2023, and again, remember, I've got the dark mode of my browser turned on, so it just flickered on me, but that's the dark mode tool, the browser taking care of business. Anyway, after it discusses what was new in the update and the stuff about installation, blah, 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 we'll come back to some of this later. What I want you to see, some of you have known that since about CF11, Adobe puts a table at the bottom of the update tech notes that tell you, did that CF update call for you to update your connector? I wish they wouldn't say recreate. It should say update. But moving on, there is a table. It's been there since like CF11. And here again, only update 5 required a connector upgrade or recreation, as they call it. Anyway, moving on, this is what's new. As of CF 2021 and 2023, both the tech notes, the update tech notes for both releases on each update will tell you at the bottom, did that update entail new packages? Yes or no? And their thinking is, well, if it did, then you'd want to update. Then I'm going to remind you that by default, when you run the update in the admin, it will update the instance of CF, whatever its version is, and the packages underlying it. And then if you want, you can go to the command line and do things from the command line. So that's what that's about. So I see P has asked a question. By the way, is that Phil Cruz? Is that what PCZ? Is that Phil? Just tell me yes or no. Then I can say Phil. When we click update in the UI, is this defaulting to update packages or update all? It's when you click update in the UI, let's be clear about what you're referring to, because I want to make sure I answer your question accurately. Where'd that CF admin go? There you go. So when we start out up here, I'm saying, before I answer your question, I'm saying that for most people, they don't even notice the package stuff. They just see this core server thing. If they see there's updates down here in the drop down, they'll see there's a new update. And like, let's say when update 7 comes out, there will be update 7, and I'll pick update 7, and there'll be a download and a download or an install button. So I'm saying if you click this install button for what they call the core server, then by default, that will update the core and all the packages. That's the way that update mechanism works. Now back to in case this was your question, there is also separately controllable managing of the packages. Now, most people are not going to have the packages be at a different version than the core. So it wouldn't normally be that somebody would say, I want to do this. But if you did do stuff from the command line, and maybe this leads to your question, there was update packages at the command line, and then there was update all. So conceivably, somebody could say update packages, say, I just want to update the packages, and it'll be to whatever the current version is, and it won't update the current version. But update all at the command line says, oh, I really want to update the core. So it's really the update all, back to, I think, the answer to your question, the update all is the equivalent of this core server update. It says install. When there's available update to install, it says install. That is the equivalent of what the cfpm update all is. Make sense? Go ahead and say yes or no, or ask a question. Cool. And is this Phil, or is it some other PCZ? Just help me out. All right, I'll wait while you decide whether to answer that or not. Moving on. Pavel. Oh, Pavel. Hey, Pavel. Okay, thank you. So, moving on. So, you may have noticed when I said that the tech note for the update, go back to the top of this particular update, and as I page down, it shows prerequisites. And by the way, just let me get this out of the way. If any of you guys see this stuff here, JDK flag requirements, and you go, oh, we got to add these to our ColdFusion JVM configuration. No, you do not. Oh, but it says Tomcat. I know ColdFusion runs on Tomcat. No, you do not. If you're running what's called the ColdFusion server deployment, where you install ColdFusion server configuration, then yeah, it under the covers runs on Tomcat, but Adobe manages it entirely. It's really not, it's hidden from you by and large. And this is not talking to you. This is talking to those who choose to install Tomcat or WebLogic or Wildfly or other Java app servers, and then they deploy ColdFusion as a war or an ear. That's what this section is referring to. So I'm just saying that's not for you. I know it says for application servers. I wish they would be more clear. But anyway, moving on, talking about the installation. So you can do stuff in the administrator, or there's a whole section on installing the updates offline. And you can see that you can download the hotfix jar, which is literally at the bottom of the screen. It says hotfix. I'm mousing over it. And at the bottom in the status bar, it says hotfix 006-330-617 jar. That's the hotfix jar, which CF's been using for years. And then if there are updated packages, or they're presuming that if you're jumping from some older version, like 3 or 4 or 5, you might need the latest packages. Well, that's what this is. I wish they would be more clear. This unzip, when I mouse over it, that is a zip file, and it says hotfix packages down at the bottom, and it says to extract that and blah, 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 blah. I'm going to talk, about, I don't want to get into the details of all this, but I want to say they tell you how to do this stuff, how to change the admin to be able to use it, and you can do all that. Or they mention that you can also, it says packages can be installed and updated from the package manager with that CFPM. So they refer to it, and it's a little confusing to people if they don't understand what we've talked about. So hopefully now you'll make a little more sense of it. But again, bottom line is, if you're online, you just do what I showed you. Either do the install on the admin or do the CFPM install from the command line. But if you're offline, then you got to deal with this stuff of getting files and paying attention to where they're extracted to. Well, what I wanted to get to, I have a discussion of that is to say, you can see the tech note if you want to do that thing to use it. We've talked a bit about it. There's some more about it. But this downloading of the repo that they are showing doing by coming into here and dragging it down this way and extracting it and pointing to a location, there's a download repo CFPM command. Now, they don't talk about that in that tech note update. I don't know why. I think they should, but I want you all to know there is a download repo command. I'm not going to bother because we're running short on time here. Just know you can use this download repo command to download effectively that zip. What is the package of, or the packaging of package updates? You can download it, and you can set where CF should look for it with update repo path. And there might be a value to some of you to change where CF looks for these extracted repo package things. Again, I don't want to get too far into the weeds here because most people don't care about this stuff. For those of you that you do, check these things out. If you have questions, follow up with me directly. You can ask in the community. Some people know about this stuff. Most people really don't. Now, I mentioned this Felix stuff. Under the covers, I said that this is all implemented under the covers in a thing called Felix. It's a Java architectural library for managing packages and package management and module management. Well, there is a Felix cache where this package management deployment of packages gets put to. So the repo is where should it find it, and then this Felix cache is where things really get deployed to when you install them and when you run them. And I don't want to get too far in the weeds on this other than to say that there is in the command line a purge cache command. And we didn't cover it. I'm not going to bother. I mean, I could do it. It's simple. You just say CFPM purge cache. Now, did I point this out? No, let me say this now. I thought I did. No, I don't. So let me just say this now. Just because I want to get it out. I have a tracker ticket out for it. So I'm going to clear the screen just so that things are a little more clear for you. So here I am at the command line, not inside of the CFPM. If I say CFPM and go into it, and if we looked at the help, I'm saying that among the many things in there, we've talked about many of these things so far. But look, there's purge cache. So I can just say purge cache. And I know it doesn't say much there. First of all, before we read the message, it says it just purges the Felix cache. Second, when I do it, it says, wait a minute, you can't purge the cache while CF is running. That's why I had stopped CF, because I had demonstrated what I'm about to tell you. So I'm not going to stop it right now. But if I stopped CF, then I could purge the cache. Well, what I wanted to point out is if I quit out of this, some of you may be tempted when you're ready to deal with doing this purge to come out and say purge cache, which is the very same command. It says right there, right? I just ran it, purge cache. There's no typo. CFPM imperative, do that thing. Please purge the cache. And you run that and it says, there's no purge cache command. I don't know what you're talking about. And it took a moment to try to find it. And it said, hey, invalid command. It's as if I said CFPM Bob. So I have a tracker ticket. If you just go to the tracker and search for CFPM, it's one of the few tickets that you'll see there about CFPM. And Adobe has acknowledged it and has said that they are working on it. They haven't fixed it yet, but I raised it in October and asked about it again in December. And it's, there hasn't been an update since November, so it's probably going to be the next update that includes bug fixes. So who knows how long that'll take. But for now, the point is, if you decide you want to do this purge cache, just go into the shell, CFPM, then inside of there, purge cache. Now, I know I didn't really cover much about what this does, but there's a folder, and that's what I'm pointing out here in the presentation. In your instance, like in my case, CFusion, or in your case, it might be Bob, if you create instances, multiple instances, in the bin folder where this command was that we've been running, there's a Felix cache. And that's kind of weird because people are like, wait a minute, the bin folder? I thought that's where commands go. Yeah, I don't know why somebody at Adobe chose to put this thing in here called the Felix cache, but there's a folder in there called the Felix cache, and it is where a bunch of compiled stuff gets stored. And sometimes Adobe will tell you, based on some problem, hey, you should purge the Felix cache. And I'm just telling you that there's a command line way to do it, or you can literally just go into the file system and just delete the files in that cache. Now, notice that the tool warned you ought to stop CF. You go to the command line, or you go to either the command line or File Explorer or whatever you like to use. You can just delete whatever you want while CF's running, but you should stop CF, purge the cache, and then start CF. So we're going to leave it at that. I don't want to get into the weeds on that. I'm just setting that stuff. Another example of stuff you never would have fathomed was a part of the package management process. And most people never, ever encounter that. But for those who do, you have a little more insight on it. Let's say you have implemented a bunch of packages. Let's say more specifically, you opted to pick and choose what to implement, and you've got like 22 of the 50 packages. Well, what if you wanted to create a list of what are those 22 packages you exported, or sorry, that you implemented, my bad. If I go back to that CF admin, this is something a lot of people don't notice. Look at this export server state. So when I click that button, it creates a file that says what are the packages I have implemented. So notice I'm in Edge. So when I did it, it downloaded. It's got a file called cfpackages.txt. I've clicked on the button to open it. And there are the packages, and it's just one big long list. I know it looks like only 7 or 8 lines. No, it's you can see the bullets on the left, 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 lines, and the 4th line is very long. And it's a list of every package and what version it is. Every package and what version it is. So I can export that. And now what can we do with that? Well, there's a command line export command, which would produce the same file. And there's a command line import. So I could import packages that's from that file that names all of them, right? So that's not just a list of names like scheduler, comma, report. No, it's in that format that it wants, and it's naming the package and the version. Well, if you create that, and the export just creates that same file. So you can create the file from the command line, you can create the file from the admin. And I showed you how to do it from the user interface. Well, now let's talk about using that to automate implementation of containers. So the ColdFusion Docker images, some of you don't even know what those are, but trust me, those who do know, there are ColdFusion Docker images. They have an environment variable that manages pulling in packages. And one is called install modules, where you provide a list of the package names, like scheduler, comma, report. That would pull in those latest versions at the time you do that install. It would pull do the download at that time. And again, you can manage this stuff. If your Docker deployment is going to be offline, you can put the packages in a different folder and tell it where to find them. And I'm not going to get into all that detail now, but the point is you can install particular modules by name, or just say, hey, I want all of them. You can say install modules all. Remember, I told you by default, they'd have no modules. If you want to, you can just say get install modules all. That's an environment variable. And you can find documentation from Adobe on how to do Docker stuff. And let me just tell you before I move on, at the end, and we're coming up on the end soon, I have a list of resources, and one of the resources, well, let me just back up. One of them is a page about the package management feature. In the ColdFusion docs is a pretty big page, 16 pages if you printed it, about package management in general. So there's a lot more you could read about there. I've tried to convey most of it here in this talk. But yeah, there's plenty. Anyway, then there's also a page on using ColdFusion's Docker images. It's in the docs, and it's on Docker, ColdFusion Docker images, and it lists the environment variables that those images support, and it discusses using this install modules. So I'm just saying, if you want to learn more about that, I'll have a link at the end to that page of that help document in the CF docs about using ColdFusion Docker images. And then lastly, let me just say that if any of you really get into doing this stuff, I've got a GitHub repo. If you Google awesome CF compose, 3 words, awesome CF compose, I've got a GitHub repo, and I've got the link to that again at the end of the talk. So don't worry about looking for it now. It's in the PDF at the end in the resource list. And in that, I've got like dozens of examples of different variants of using ColdFusion Docker images and Lucy images and or just command box images. But in the ColdFusion section, I've got an example of using this install modules. And I happen to do stuff with compose files there. For those that know what that is, you can turn it into a Docker file. It's a handful of lines. So I just show it as a compose file. You can turn it into a Docker file. The point is, it's very easy to do. And I'm just saying, you don't have to take my word for it. You can actually run this stuff and see it for yourself. Now let's move on. Then there's an import modules, right? The first one was called install modules. They just chose to pick this name. The first one's called install modules. That's a list of packages to be installed. And then there's import modules. And that you point to one of these files that has the exported list of all of them. All right. So that export can be used to pull into the import command with cfpm, or it can be used to create a container using the environment variable import modules. Again, many capabilities. That's why I call the talk many capabilities. Now, this again may be the part that intrigues more people than anything else. How do you identify what packages you need for your current application or for all of your apps, right? You have 1,000, 10,000 CFM and CFC templates. How do you know what package you need? It's a good question. And they came up with an answer, and it came out with CF 2021. But if you didn't ever look into this, and virtually nobody talks about it, you wouldn't know. It's the scan command. There was a scan command, and you just point it at a directory and say, scan that directory and tell me what I need. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. And I'm just going to, I didn't even think about, planning for this. I'm just going to say cfpm scan, and I'm going to say c:/inet bub www root. Right. Now, I should have tried this beforehand to make sure. I've done it before, and I know some of you are thinking, you know what the answer is. This isn't the problem that some of you think it is. But I want to see first if I just go into is this one of those ones where things don't work from outside? Give me a moment. I'm going into the shell, and I'm going to say scan. I don't mind doing things live. It's how we all learn. Now, there it went flying by, and I should have cleared the screen before we did it, but that was the difference. And just for the moment, I'm going to say it ended by saying, I need, for that set of code that was in that directory, I need the feed, the image, the FTP, the mail, and the Derby packages. And again, don't worry for now about what my code was doing. It's not important. The point is that code got scanned and it said this. Now I know there's a bunch of errors up there. Could not parse a file. So let me just tell you, there are gotchas where if the file can't be parsed, if it's got an error that literally wouldn't be able to run. Oh, and this is even more weird. I see that I happen to also have implemented Lucy in somewhere in my inetpub www root. So I got caught tripping over something that's about Lucy. So forget about that, because obviously not going to be able to look at a thing created or compiled by Lucy. Let me just change it differently. I've got a folder. I don't think this will be. Well, let me do this. C:3 cfusion. Typo. Come on. All right, I don't want to keep you guys in suspense. I'm just going to go find my ColdFusion 2023 folder. Not that it's important that I demonstrate this particular one, but I want to understand this. Was it a misspelling on my part? Was it that the capitalization matters? I don't think so. So here's that folder. The clipboard. And that. Oh, it's not the C drive. That was my bad. My bad. I have my ColdFusion on the C drive. And in fact, I'm going to, just to prove that it's not about the case sensitivity is not the issue, I'm going to make it say D:. Now, again, it's flying by. There are things in there that it's trying to scan that it can't. And now that I think about it, that's got what you call precompiled templates that are in the ColdFusion, admin API and the ColdFusion administrator. Those are precompiled templates. So that's not a great thing for me to have pointed to, because it's got all those that daggone it. Well, this will happen to you too. Finally, I know I've got a directory. A second. So again, I just picked a random folder where I know I have some ColdFusion code. And again, it's saying some things like I couldn't parse the file. Now, I'm trying, this is not throwing anything under the bus or saying it doesn't work. No. If the file doesn't compile correctly, like if I try to run that template, I would get an error that says, wait a minute, there's an invalid token. I'm just saying if I ran it in ColdFusion, it would fail with that error. Well, if it fails to run, then that means it fails to parse. And if it fails to parse, this tool can't parse it. So the tool is telling me that I can't, it can't tell me what CF templates, what packages are needed for a page that it can't parse. So let's put that aside. More importantly, notice here you go. Look, that's a nice long list. So of the demos I've got, those demos in the end, it said, well, you need these templates. And if I didn't have those implemented, I can implement them. Or if I was creating a container, now here's the big wrap it all up. If I was creating a CF container using the Adobe ColdFusion images, when I build that container, I'd pass in install modules equals this list. I'd take off the bracket at the front and the back, but I'd say install modules equals this list. And then when that container started, it would load those packages. And then if that code was implemented in that container, or if I had a volume pointing to that code, the point is, if I run that container pointing at that code will work because I will have imported the packages that were needed. Now, again, let me just be clear for some of you who are like, this sounds like a lot of complication. I don't want to deal with that. Well, you're right. If you just want to install ColdFusion and you let it install by default all packages up front, and when you run the update, it just updates all packages, you don't have to worry about this stuff. But people, the reason why it exists is for people that want to manage this stuff and parse it apart and pick and choose what they want. And I'm just letting you know that there's these capabilities which virtually nobody else ever talks about. And that's how they work. So pretty simple, straightforward, really. Now, some of you are going to say to me, now, wait a minute, Charlie, I'm trying this in my ColdFusion 2021 and it just will not work. And I'm going to tell you, sadly, no, it will not work. Some bug happened in update 5 of CF 2021. It's not affecting 2023, but an update 5 or above of 2021, and I mean even to 12, which is the current latest update. If you're on any of those later updates, sadly, the CFPM scan tool just will not work. And it's been reported as a tracker ticket, so Adobe's aware of it. We hope they'll fix it. Just saying, sadly, that won't work. Now, what can you do? Well, conceivably, you could uninstall your updates down to update, 2, which was fine, or 3 or 4. You're probably not going to want to do that. Now, could you scan the code base that you use with CF 2021 using CF 2023? Yeah, you could do that. There's really nothing wrong with doing that. So if you have 2023, you could use its CFPM scan and point it at your code base. So that'd be fine. Actually, I just realized I must have skipped past something. Oh no, it's coming up. Never mind, my bad. So let me finish this thought. And then another thing some of you may have noticed is that you might say, I'm going to do the help again. And here's the scan command. You might say that when in your CF 2021, when you look at this, it says you got to tell me where the code lives and you got to give me this server URL. And you might go, what is that? Well, again, if you read the docs, it tells you what it was. It wanted you to point to the ColdFusion directories, the cfusion www root, the root, the built-in web server. Well, good news is they realized that was not a great idea. And in 2023, that's no longer required. So remember, I'm looking at the help for 2023. And let me tell you, for anybody who cares about this stuff, that's the only difference. I have compared them. The only difference is this one line in 2023. There's no second argument. It's just the code base path. You just point it to where your code lives. And CF doesn't even need to be running. When you do this CF 2023 scan, you don't even have to be running CF 2023. So yeah, let me back up and say that if you wanted to do the scan of your stuff that you're using in CF 2021 and you can't get the scan to work in 2021, well, you could just get 2023 and either use the zip and extract it or do the install of it if you're going to change to using it soon. And whether you have CF 2023 running or not, you can go into the CFPM tool of 2023 and do the scan, and it does not need CF to be running. Okay, so let's move on. Pretty cool stuff. And I wondered what I thought I'd forgotten. I just realized I moved it down to the bottom. There's not only a scan feature, but there's also a scan and install. And that says scan my code and install into the current instance where the CFPM is running, install the packages that are needed. That's pretty cool, right? So you could do that. So I'll leave you all to explore that if that's of interest to you. And as far as evolution over time, I've already talked about both of these, but I just wanted to pull this out to say that, if you talk to people and say, it doesn't work, well, one thing that didn't work was that it wouldn't let you, ensure that you got the right packages for the update level of your core engine, and they fixed that. That was nice. And that was as of the October 2023 updates. I couldn't remember when it was when I mentioned it earlier. So it was the update 11 of 2021 and update 5 of 2023. Those were in October of 2023. That's when they fixed this thing. They fixed it to work the way we'd expect it to work. And again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you missed what I said in passing, or it didn't make sense, then don't worry about it. The point is that problem's fixed. If you know what I'm talking about, that problem's fixed. And I'll give you a link to the doc page on that, and you can read more about it if that's of interest to you. And then I mentioned that scan feature in 2023 required CF server URL as in a second argument. Now they took that away in 2023. So the scan works just easily and it's great. So that was the only things, but those are important. Some people are going around saying it doesn't work, and it might be that it doesn't work in some cases, but it has been fixed. So, and then there was that one thing that still remains about 2021. So anyway, wrapping up, as far as resources are concerned, sorry, we went over a few minutes. This presentation, the URL for it is the one you're looking at, but in the PDF will be this link to what you're looking at right now. That's the recording. And the slides are already posted. It's at my presentations section of my website. You can just go to carehart.org/presentations, or you can fill in this long URL. but really just go to Kara.org presentations and you'll see it there. All my other presentations I've given. It's up at the top. I've got them in reverse descending order. Now about the docs page, about package management, I'm telling you, there's what would be 16 pages if you printed it. Yeah, we used to print things. There's this paper and laser printers, stuff back in the turn of the century. Anyway, so if you printed out this doc, it would be 16 pages. And so that's a lot of stuff is my point. And here's the URL for it. And it's just the docs page called ColdFusion Package Manager. There was also an Adobe blog post back at the release of CF 2021 when this stuff came out. They did a blog post on the package manager and they called it Install Only What You Need. And, you might want to look at that to get a couple of insights. And then there's a bunch of comments down at the bottom, some of which are talking about things that, again, have been since resolved. So check that out. I'm not sure if I've provided updated comments for the things that I've seen. I can't remember. But anyway, the point is that's a resource that you might want to turn to. And then back to the Docker images. This is the page in the docs help about using ColdFusion Docker images and the available environment variables and where you can get them and all that stuff. And I've got blog posts and presentations in the past that I've done on using the ColdFusion Docker images and using the Lucy images and the command box images. So again, if you're interested in Docker deployment with ColdFusion, those are available resources. And then remember my awesome CF Compose at GitHub. My bad, I should have said GitHub. It's at GitHub. But if you just Google awesome CF Compose, you should find it. And here's the actual link to it, github.com/Arehart. And there's the full link. And this is a particular one pointing to the example of doing the install modules environment variable. So again, if you go to the README of the whole project, you'll see the dozens of things that I've got examples of, but there's the one on using the install modules. And I had done it back when CF 2021 came out. You could use it with 2023, of course. And then that October 2023 update that changed how package management picked what version to install, they have a discussion of that in that package management documentation. And there's the anchor called cfpm changes. So if you want to read more about that, go check that out. And that in the tech note for update 5, I happen to point to the one for update 5. There was one for update 11 as well. There's the discussion in the tech notes for those updates in October. All right. Whew. That's it. Several minutes over. Seems to be about average. So anyway, the CF Package Manager feature and that cfpm tool, I hope you agree, has far more aspects to it than most people would realize. Like I told you, there's virtually nothing else written on it except that docs page. So I hope to have contributed a little more, filling in the gaps than just what the docs page had. And some of these things just relate solely to managing packages, while some relate to updating CF or automating instance creation or analyzing your code. So a lot of cool stuff, and it's evolved and we should continue to. So keep an eye on it. Don't dismiss it. If something doesn't work right, don't just grumble and go away. Bring it up to Adobe. There's many ways to provide feedback to them. There's the blog posts, you could comment there, the tracker tickets, you could comment there, or you can send email to them. Like at CFSUP. I just always like to point out, for those who don't know, CF support is CFSUP for support, SUP. S in Sam, U, P as in Paul. CFSUP at adobe.com, and they will hear your concerns that way. And then if you have follow-up information to me, you can reach out to me through my email address, easiest way and probably the best way, because I read email all day, every day. I interact with all my clients that way. But if you choose to, you can also try to reach me through direct messages or mentions on these other things. And I try to keep up on those. But of course, that's like a constant stream of river flowing. And I commit to reading all my email. I try to keep up on all these other things. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it. I see some people have already added some comments. Yep. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. There you go. That's my goal. Pavel said, learned quite a bit that I didn't know about. And that's my goal. I assume that most of us just don't have time to pay attention to this stuff. And that's half of my goal when I do these talks, is just to bring to your attention the stuff that's out there. And then I try to fill it in with the fill the gaps in with some experience I've had using it. Cool. And Roman said the same thing. So thank you all, and anybody else that's out there listening. Appreciate y'all showing up. I look forward to doing another one. I've got a whole bunch of topics like this where I've just decided I'm going to start doing them. So I don't know if it'll be next week. I don't commit to it in advance. I generally decide that week, do I feel like I'm going to have time, and I'll put it together. Often I've been gathering these thoughts for weeks or months, and then I just organize them into the presentation. And a lot of them are things that I deal with in my consulting. So I see these things, and that's why I know about them already. And then some are things that I haven't even tried, and I trip over something. And hey, that's just like, that's why it's live stream, right? Live, baby, nothing like it. Little Tony Kornheiser shout out. So don't forget, the presentation's available online at carehart.org. And grab the slides, read more about it, share it with your friends. Let me know your feedback, and I'll look forward to seeing you all whenever the next one is. Until then.